The German war is therefore at an end. Advance Britannia. Long live the cause of freedom. God save the King.
The end of the war brought renewed activity at Alexandra Palace, and 13 months later, on the 7th of June 1946, BBC Television picked up exactly where it had left off. Well, almost exactly.
I was so angry about the way we'd been treated. I wanted to go back and start with the middle of the film. However, I was told I couldn't do this, but we could start with Mickey's gala premiere.
The new television diet was described as balanced. However, there was very little to chew on. But then in the 1940s, it was not so much the content as the mere presence of live pictures that satisfied the appetite of television audiences. Dennis Norden.
It was sufficient miracle to see somebody walking through a cheese factory. And he was walking through that cheese factory while you were sitting in your home, but you could see him walking through that cheese factory. And that in itself was entertainment. Nowadays, of course, he'd have to do a song and dance, probably strip off, and certainly have some television graphics surrounding him.
In 1946, it was only Britain's well-to-do who could afford such visual treats. But the immediate post-war figure of 14,500 sets grew rapidly, and the audience came to include some rather unlikely viewers.
There are people who said that their pets liked television. And in fact, one lady wrote and said that all her friends who had cats had said the same thing, that the cats loved certain programs, and that we should put on a program for them, and we should call it Pussy's Half Hour. And we had a great time trying to persuade them to do, great close-ups of fish, boiled fish, cream jugs, which would be pornography for cats.
The major boost of post-war television came in 1953. In this year, a staggering 2 million people paid a less than staggering £2 each for television licenses. And men, women and children and cats, they all gathered around their sets to view the coronation. Whereas the 1937 coronation had been covered by just one stationary camera, 12 cameramen now line the procession route. And it took negotiation and renegotiation for BBC Television to actually be allowed inside Westminster Abbey. And once inside, certain logistical problems had to be overcome, as Tony Bridgewater explains.
There was an orchestra there. We said, well, we wouldn't take up any much room, and we'd put our smallest cameraman there, and he squeezed in, and he says the conductor's baton every now and then struck him on the shoulder.
Madam, is your Majesty willing to take the oath?
I am willing.
Will you solemnly promise and swear?
Ironically, it was in the year of this, the BBC's greatest triumph to date, that the government announced its plans for a second channel. It was to be a competitor, run by private enterprise, and funded by advertising. Such revolutionary proposals were the source of hours of parliamentary fun. There was consternation in the Commons and alarm in the Lords. Could communism be just a commercial away?
My Lords, to place the second programme in the hands of a company dependent on the continuing support of advertisers will destroy public service broadcasting. Programmes will be made not in the national interest, but in the interest of the advertisers. And I say that the two will directly conflict. Imagine, if you will, a television tour of the royal yacht, showing the carpets and furniture described over the air for the benefit of advertisers. Such an outrage could spread communism throughout the country.
My lords, whilst I believe the noble lord to have overstated the problem, the advertiser is clearly influencing programs. The situation is that he is going round to the program company to see in connection with what program that advertisement is going to appear.
My lords, there are many speakers in this debate, and I have added myself to their number to ask only this. Why should we slavishly copy this low-grade American ideal? What sort of future is this Elizabethan age to be? We remain a first-class power because of the quality of our culture and our people. The people who conquer Everest. The people who act like Laurence Olivier and compose like Benjamin Britten. With this second programme, the government proposed to let down the Elizabethan age. It is shameful to plunge the innocent people of this country into this planned and premeditated orgy of vulgarity. This competitive hullabaloo is not only vulgar, but contrary to human dignity and reason.
But despite the noble lord's protestations, the bill was passed and ITV went on the air on September the 22nd, 1955. Just two companies were involved at first, Associated Rediffusion and ABC TV. And whilst only one London television in every 22 was actually equipped to receive the new service, the BBC monopoly had been broken. The present IBA Director of Television, David Glenn Cross.
ITV immediately brought a more popular, accessible style of television, and so I think its general function was to open up television generally and show that there were different ways of doing things.
However, the first programme was a formal gala ceremony, and the Postmaster General, Lord Hill, was at pains to assure the doubting lords that commercial television could actually exist alongside the moral fabric of the nation.
No, my Lord Mayor, we shall not witness the spectacle during our favourite symphony of the first violinist pausing to inform us of his favourite brand of cigarettes. Nor indeed will Hamlet interrupt his soliloquy to tell us of the favourite brand of toothpaste ordinarily used in Elsinore.
Such speeches may have appeased the opposition, but they did little to impress the television critics. In the Daily Mirror, Clifford Davis wrote,
"The big letdown was that boring opening. Why does ITV have to go all high-hat and pompous instead of setting the screen sizzling from the start? It was bad showmanship to waste so much time instead of getting on with the job in hand, the job that ITV has been brought in to do, to entertain."
But when it came to the job of entertainment, ITV was soon working overtime, and British television entered a popular boom in the 60s with programmes such as The Army Game, Bless This House, and On the Buses.
Busman caught climbing through window of Clippy's Convenience wearing pyjamas. Wait till they read this, mate.
You're not going to send that to the management, are you?
No, the Sunday papers. I'm having a lovely day today.
Stan, when you're on an early shift, you should be in bed by 10 o'clock.
He probably was, then he had to get out again and come home.
On the Buses was one of many situation comedies produced by London Weekend Television. Taking their cue from the American Honey, I'm Home comedy shows, British sitcoms have grown to form the backbone of light entertainment. But that is slightly misleading, since the term sitcom may be applied to any humorous programme where characters interact. Former London Weekend producer Humphrey Barclay.
There are a lot of different levels of sitcom, as there are in the whole tradition of English humour. If you think from Seaside Postcards to Oscar Wilde, it's quite a long range of programmes. And the half-hour comedy show actually covers that huge range, from the hugely popular kind of thing like On the Buses, or the general sort of musical tradition of Heidi High and so on, to the sort of Agony, Whoops Apocalypse, Yes Minister, which are actually quite demanding on the audience. They're not just totally sit back and roar with laughter. The audience is actually engaged in the wit of the piece.
God! Cabinet reshuffle? It's being rumoured that the PM will announce important cabinet changes before the end of the present session. Well, why didn't I know about this? How do they know? Is this true, Humphrey?
Oh, Minister, I'm only a humble civil servant. I do not move in such exalted circles as cabinet ministers and journalists.
But is this rumour true?
Yes.
The success of Yes Minister won critical approval from reviewers and prime ministers. But many sitcoms that succeeded in the ratings failed to woo the critics, and even the odd viewer has been known to decry the programme he watches. So if high budgets, top-class acting and witty, inventive scriptwriting are not necessarily the formula for success. What is? Dennis Norden.
I don't know, repetition as much as anything. If you keep a thing on, odds are that people will get to like it. You can't lump them all together. You can't just say sitcoms, because there's The Likely Lads and there's Porridge. They're first division.
Carnal thoughts, give them the big E, see? Big elbow. Less you think about women, the better. God blimey, look at her.
Oh, way down. We now pan downwards an enormous distance, and we come to the great mass of sitcoms. The paradox is the public tend to love and to go for the best and the worst. If a thing is that good, if it's a Fawlty Towers, the public flock to it, they love it. But by the same token, they love the dross as well. They love the real pits.
Yes, Mr. Hedges.
Why not show them what a charming piece this is, sung in its entirety?
Yes. I'll play, you sing. What key?
Well, I'm bass, you know.
Are you sure?
Oh yes. A bit lower, I think.
Please Sir, starring John Alderton. The growth of comedy for the BBC was marked by the appearance of Tony Hancock on the small screen and series such as Steptoe and Son. It has often been suggested that the 60s saw a transition in the BBC as it became more audience conscious. But the thought that the BBC has become popularised at the expense of education and information is one that the managing director and former head of Light Entertainment, Bill Cotton, will quite literally not entertain.
The idea that BBC One now is any more popularised than it was in 1956, I just don't accept at all. It's a sort of a sensationalised way of looking at the BBC. It looks good in print, written by reporters who actually haven't even studied the situation and don't know really what they're talking about. But if you want to do a bit of BBC bashing, that'll do for, that does for a start. But if you really want to see what a popularised network is, you have to go to America or go and see Rupert Murdoch's wonderful channel in Australia with back-to-back American material.